Hello, and welcome to the very last episode of Rights for Women for 2024. It is going to be a great chat tonight. It's a wrap-up chat, and I've invited all of the guest hosts, but in my usual style, it was very last minute because I had edits and everything coming on top of me at the end of the year. So I wasn't able to organise a time that all of our guest hosts for the year could attend. So there's just going to be me and a couple of the guest hosts here, Mary Lou Stevens and Jo Riccioni, with Annie Bucknell, who is the VA on Rights for Women and has just taken Rights for Women this year from strength to strength, particularly on social media, on Substack. So it's going to be great to have Annie along for that chat. And she's been an absolute godsend to me. So I'm really excited to have her here chatting with us on the Convo Couch for the last time in 2025. It is Monday, December 16, as I'm recording this, sweltering in Sydney with a backdrop here of flooders that are going absolutely nuts this summer. I don't know if you have them where you are, but they're everywhere. And I actually don't mind it. I quite like it. It's really the sound of summer for me. So I've been sitting out having a bit of a rest this afternoon on the veranda and just soaking up the sounds of the cicadas. It's been amazing. So before the guest hosts join me on the Convo Couch, I just wanted to say a few thank yous. The biggest one is to Annie Bucknell, who has joined me on the Rights for Women team this year. Annie is a virtual assistant and does all of the socials, the fabulous reels that you see on Instagram and Facebook. She puts together the Substack newsletter. She was the one who actually encouraged me to get onto Substack, and I'm absolutely loving that. She does the transcripts each week that go on the website. She just does so many things, and she is a fantastic support to me. So thank you so much, Annie. I really don't know how I would have got through this year without you, and I'm looking forward to doing more next year with you on Rights for Women. Massive shout out to the guest hosts, and I want to make sure that I don't miss any of them out, from Rachael Johns, Ray Cairns, Jo Riccioni, Mary Lou Stevens, Meredith Jaffe, Anne Freeman, Maya Linnell, and I know I'm going to miss someone, so I'm going to have to come back and add them in. It's been a huge help to me to have the guest hosts step in when there's been a gap or I haven't been able to just get the book read or whatever, or just haven't been able to fit it into my schedule with my teaching and my writing, which I've been also trying to prioritize again this year. So it's been great to have the guest hosts and also just to have their perspectives. Jo Riccioni talking to fantasy authors because that's her genre, and Ray talking to crime authors. So it's been fantastic to have the guest hosts come on and fill in those gaps and to actually give a new perspective and just new life to those segments. So thank you very much to all of the guest hosts. Huge thank you to all the listeners out there who have tuned in week after week. We've done 43 episodes this year, and it's been really great, again, for another year to have you tuning in and listening to Rights for Women, and also for your feedback, for those people who actually drop us a note and tell us how much they enjoyed the episode or share it on social media or anything like that. It's a huge help to us for you to be able to do that, and also to, of course, leave reviews wherever you listen to the podcast, whether that's Spotify or Apple or wherever it is. If you have been doing any of that, thank you so much. I encourage you to keep doing that in 2024. We have had our listener survey, and there might be a couple of little tweaks next year to Rights for Women as a result of that survey and just some different things Annie and I have been throwing around. If you haven't yet joined us on Substack, I highly recommend you pop over there and follow Rights for Women on Substack. There is a weekly summary newsletter type thing of every episode that goes out. That's whether you're free or paid. If you're a paid subscriber, you get a bonus little bit of the interview each week, as well as other bonuses that come from me into solo eps and webinars and things like that. They're all listed on the Substack site. So it would be great if you could join the Substack crew over there. Don't be too scared of it. It's nothing scary or anything onerous. It's just a great writing community where there is loads to read if you choose to, or you can scroll through things, you can read notes, you can read the chat threads, and you can do a whole lot of things and meet and get to know a whole lot of writers over there as well. Definitely pop on over to Substack over the holidays if you haven't had a chance to do that yet. Just before the guest hosts join me, just a reminder, I do have a writing retreat coming up in April, 10 to 13. There are only a couple of solo rooms left, single rooms. The rest are share rooms, which is fine because you get to meet new people and meet new writer friends, or bring a friend with you. But that would be a great Christmas present to yourself. If you're a writer, there is a payment plan, or you can maybe get a loved one to buy you that. So if you go to pamelacook.com.au, you'll find all the info there on the Next Chapter Writing Retreat at Currajong in New South Wales, along with all the testimonials from this year's guests who came along and have formed a great little writing community, actually. It's been really lovely to see them connect and keep the connection going through Facebook and emails and things like that. Would love to see you at the Next Chapter Writing Retreat if you are considering getting away and getting some time for yourself for your writing. So over the Christmas break, I am actually going to be writing a novella for the 2026 HQ HarperCollins anthology. I have a novella called The Christmas Contract currently out in this year's anthology, which is A Country Farm Christmas, alongside Penelope Janu, Lily Malone and Stella Quinn. Next year, Renee Black is going to be joining us. So yeah, very excited to be writing my third novella. I never thought I could write a novella, but there you go. You never know what you can do until you try. And so I'm going to be working on that over January and February. And then after that, I'm actually going to be going back to revise Because You're Mine, which was a book that I wrote a couple of years ago and has been sitting there. And I've got some new ideas for that. So I'm going to be going back to that in 2025. You'll hear about some other things that I'm going to be doing when we get to the chat with Mary Lou Stevens, Joe Riccioni, Rachael Johns for a little bit. Rachael has to pop off to a Romance Writers of Australia meeting, so she's with us for a little while, and my fabulous VA, Annie Bucknell. So sit back, grab a cuppa, pop on your earphones, put on your walking shoes, whatever it is you do, and enjoy this end of year wrap up with Mary Lou, Joe, Annie, Rachael, and myself. 5. Okay, so we're going to kick off with Rachael because she's got to leave in a little while. And just to start with, Rach, just generally, how has your writing year been and what have been the kind of highlights and perhaps any low points that you might have had?
Yeah, I'm going to have to really think because as I just thinking before, this year's gone really quickly in some ways, but it also feels like it's stretched and there's been a lot of things. And I keep saying like last year, and I'm actually still referring to this year. I did that today. But there's been a lot of highlights. I think the biggest highlight for me, writing-wise, would be, there's a couple actually. We'll start with the release of my first rom-com type book, The Other Bridget, in January. That was just so much fun, and like writing a book about books and about libraries and celebrating the joy of reading and how much reading can change your life and have an impact on people. Just the stories I got from that, meeting new readers. And I think, it just felt like a special book launch for me, book release. So I'm really happy about that. And of course, then I think I wrote the sequel or kind of the link book this year. I think I wrote that at the beginning of the year, and that's called The Bad Bridesmaid, and it's coming out at the beginning of next year. I had 2 book releases out this year. Outback Reunion was my last book in the Bunyip Bay series. It just feels like the year's been a blur, actually, to be honest, because in addition to writing Outback Reunion, finishing it, writing The Bad Bridesmaid, maybe I did that. The order's it's all just too hard to think about. I've also been writing next year's, hopefully, women's fiction book. I have launched a podcast myself this year with my good friend and fellow writer, Sophie Green, and that was a real highlight. So many conversations that I had about issues in the writing industry and writing craft, that Sophie's really wise and getting her opinion, and she's also a publisher. So that was just something that I never thought about doing, and it was supposed to be my year of no, to be honest. I failed that dismally.
Sounds like it really worked, Rach.
Yeah, I failed that dismally. It was going to be my year of no because I was just starting to feel that overwhelm again that I had a few years ago, and I'm aware that I need to watch out for burnout and things, and I had a lot of my writing plate. So it was going to be my year of no, where I said no to cover quotes, no to doing extra workshops and things outside of publicity periods, and no to like any other kind of opportunities that came along. And I said yes to Sophie when she said, do you want to start a podcast? And we'll record one a week. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I said yes to a number of cover quotes because basically if you land in my email and ask me, it's going to be very hard for me to say no, but I'm determined to try year of no .2 that next year. Okay. But I did say no to a few things. So I feel like I am getting slightly better. But yeah, it's been a really full year, lots of exciting things happening, but also very busy. So I'm wishing that I could have a holiday, but I don't think I can.
All right, we'll see how no 2.1 or whatever it is next year goes.
Yeah, I'll let you know this time next year, hey?
Yes, do another review. How about you, Mary Lou? You're joining us from Borneo.
Yes,
You've had a
yes,
huge
yes.
year.
So I might start with the low light first, which isn't actually about writing. It's just, I was still supposed to be in South America. But my husband turned yellow in Uruguay and had to have his gallbladder out. And so we came back to Australia. So we were back in Australia for a couple of months. And honestly, Uruguay was really expensive, and we were there for 5 months and we couldn't afford to go back to South America. So we're hanging around Asia where it's easy to save money. But I'll be back at the end of January for the launch of The Jam Maker, which is the third in my historical foodie fiction trilogy. And one of the things, actually, I'm looking forward to the whole book tour, but I've persuaded Josephine Moon, who's the queen of contemporary foodie fiction, to join me for a couple of events on the Sunshine Coast. So, yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
I remember when I accidentally started writing this foodie fiction trilogy. I never meant to do it. And I said to Josephine, who's a great friend of mine, I said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thing. And she said, hon, you're writing historical. You couldn't be more different to what I'm doing if you try.
Why don't you guys go together? You should do I can't think of the word, co-write. You can do the historical and she can do the contemporary.
A dual timeline. That's
a
great idea, Rachael.
I love the idea of co-writing with someone, although I think I'd be an absolute nightmare too because I'm not very good at planning and stuff. But I think, you guys are really good friends and you've got those strengths and those different parts. I think that would be something exciting to explore.
Oh, I love that. I think that's genius.
If you do it, can you put me in the acknowledgements?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Gosh, we'll dedicate it to you.
Yay, please do it.
Josephine's writing children's books. Her first one comes out, I think, about the middle of next year. But I might be able to persuade her. We'll see.
And you had a book out, of course, Mary Lou, The Chocolate.
I did. But once again, that feels like ages ago because I'm gearing up for the next one. And I'm going to have to reread The Jam Maker because I'm into the second draft of the 2026 novel. And, and Rachael, you know how this feels all the time. Doing 2 books a year. Gosh, I don't know.
I can do 2 books a year much longer, to be honest. But I do know what you mean. That's why my previous thing was like all over the place because my brain is just a mess.
But I got to say the highlight of my year was sitting in Uruguay, getting an idea for a book that I never, ever expected. Oh, wow. And I had pretty much finished all the drafts of The Jam Maker and it was just going through edits with HQ. And I had a bit of time off writing because when HQ said, what have you got next? I went, just give me a bit of time. Because a book for me takes so long and there's so much research and I don't know, whatever. I just can't go into a project if I'm not in boots and all and in for the long slog, pretty much.
Yeah.
But I got this idea and it just really made my heart soar and I went, oh gosh, I want to do this. So I emailed my publisher and went this. And she said, just give me a bit more information and I'm going to take it to acquisitions next week. And honestly, within about 10 days of that, I've got this idea, sending it to my publisher. Within 10 days, I had another 2-book deal. And honestly, I felt like I was exactly where I'd wanted to be for all these years of writing and rejection, the 3 practice novels that never will get anywhere, all the rejections I got for Love the Apple Blossom before I got signed. And I got rejection after rejection for that book before it got signed. And then my second deal, I got on a synopsis and 3 chapters. And the third deal was, I've got this idea. And I went, oh my God, this is what it feels like when you're a real writer.
I love that.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, really. Congratulations.
To go, this is what I've worked so hard for so long to actually be where I am now. And then, of course, I had to write the book.
So you're still in the middle of writing
that? That's the tough part.
Yeah. Are you writing that now?
So the first draft is done. I'm doing the next draft. Yeah, so 125,000 words or something. But that's probably, I don't know, Jo, how long are your books? Because fantasy
about
so long.
Somewhere between 110, 120,
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
I write ridiculously long books, don't worry.
Yes, I know. Look, I've got friends who write 80,000 word books, and I'm going,
Oh, I wish. I'm so jealous because the book that I'm writing currently, The Lucky Sisters, I think I hit 53,000 today. And it's only, I don't know if it's even hit the midpoint type thing yet. And yeah, it just doesn't feel like much has happened in it. I ramble way too much.
That's all right. It's the first draft.
In life and on the page.
Yeah. Jo, what about you? How's your writing year been?
Yeah, it's been good. Busy. This time last year, remember, I had just found out that the Rising and the Branded were going to be taken into the US and the UK. So that happened.
Exciting.
Yeah, so I went over to the UK to launch the Branded, and we had an event there, and that was good and fun. And then the Rising comes out in February next year, and the ARCs have gone out, and I've started to get a few early reviews in for that. But I do feel as though I've been like smacking the arse of these books for the last couple of years and sending them out into the world, so I do feel as though I can understand how it always used to amaze me when I'd listen to other writers going on about how they would have to go and promote these books and they couldn't even remember writing them because they were already moved on to the next book and even the next book after that. And that's how it can happen when you have these staggered release dates.
So everything happens so long in the publishing industry, doesn't it? So like you finish writing it, but then it's another year to 18 months before it actually comes out. So that's a long time between drinks.
And I wrote these books before COVID. That's how
wow.
long it's taken. But on from a creative point of view, I'm halfway through the first draft of my fourth novel, which is just at the moment it's a standalone. But it was interesting listening to Rachael talk about being 50,000 words in and you're not even at the midway point. I'm like, thought it was a standalone, and now the plot has become bigger than her, and I'm not sure whether I'm a duology writer. I might have to get another book out of it. I'm not sure. But I'm very excited about this new book. It is still fantasy elements, still romantic elements, but it's grounded. It's more historical fantasy. It's set in the Victorian period, but also in contemporary period as well. So it's a dual time. Yeah, so it's back to historical for me, which was my first novel but this has fantasy elements still, so I'm still staying within the fantasy world. And other than that, down points I guess is tied up with high points as well. Writing is high and low, isn't it?
That's so true.
And having to get up at 5 a.m. to do it before work. I'm still working and writing, and so that's always a challenge.
Oh, thanks, Jo. That's so exciting with your US releases coming out.
Yeah, it is. It's very exciting when you get people sending you pictures of your book in, say, Iowa. Or in some airport in Hawaii or somewhere like that. Do you know what I mean? It's very interesting. Yeah.
How about you, Annie? This has been your big year of launching your VA business and working with heaps of people, really. How's it gone for you?
Absolutely. So I am an emerging writer. I suppose what the biggest gift has been just being able to work with people like yourselves and be immersed in the writing and publishing world nonstop. I think it's really impossible to not feel inspired when you're working with amazing women who are telling incredible stories, and you get to be a part of bringing those stories to life in your own little way, in that, even in that ministerial kind of context where you're doing behind the scenes stuff. And you can't help but imagine, maybe one day I'll have my seat at the table if I just tippy-tap away from every now and again. Yeah, it's been such a blessing, really exciting and great to work on the podcast and things like that. I feel really lucky to get sneak peek at the episodes before they come out and who your exciting guests are. And I think probably one of my favourite episodes from the year was the one that you did solo, Pam, where you were saying reasons to keep going and reasons to keep writing. And I think that a lot of listeners resonated with that too. Yeah, maybe a high point has been finding my own inspiration and my own confidence through the people that I work with, and being able to pick up my own book as well, and finding ways to slot that in amongst everything else.
I'd love to know, Annie, because a lot of the questions people get often, I think, is how you fit your writing around. And I see what you do because I can usually see your imprint, which is fantastic, on the authors that you work with, and I know a lot of them myself, and we all rave about you, but you have a very full-on schedule. And I just thought there might be listeners who wonder how you do fit your writing in around. Jo mentioned the other job, so getting up at 5 a.m. How do you do it?
It goes in my calendar. That's the honest truth. I have a standing date with myself from 8 till 9, and I don't always make it. That's true also, because I have a child and occasionally my child doesn't like to abide by my calendar, but that's part of it. And then also recently I was talking to Sophie and she was teaching me about like she's just
Sophie Green, I'm guessing.
Yes, so Sophie Green. And I want her to start a Substack because I'm like, you need to share this stuff about creativity, which she does share on the Dear Rach and So podcast as well. But she was talking about creativity being like a river you can step into when you've got 15 minutes and you can train your brain to just step into the river. So that's my goal for 2025.
Because that's how she writes, basically, isn't it?
Yeah. So that way I could, if I've got a little tiny chunk, I could maybe like make a few notes and then become even more productive. Because at the moment it does feel a little bit slow going, but I'm essentially to be organized as a virtual assistant or anything like that. You live and die by your calendar. If it's not in the calendar, it doesn't get done. And anything that is in the calendar has to get done. So those are so I even put my gym stuff in there so that I will do it.
I've got to get better at the whole calendar thing next year.
Yeah, same. I was thinking I need to put the gym in there so it gets done.
And Annie, you have gotten back into the writing too through writing poetry, haven't you?
I did, yes. Actually, that was one of the ways I tiptoed back into it. So I'd been working on a manuscript for a number of years and just had some big upheavals in my life. And I just felt like I wasn't the same person that started writing that manuscript. And it felt so far away from me that I just felt like I couldn't return to it. So I just started writing poetry, and just the act of getting words out and just allowing myself that freedom of expression led me to revisit an old project I'd started when I was 21, and I just didn't have the life experience really to write the idea at that point. And now I'm like, oh, it's taken hold of me. So I've given myself permission to put the other one on hold. Maybe that'll come back to me in 10 years and to work on the one from 10 years ago. But honestly, I guess what I'm learning is that it doesn't really matter. It's more about creating a writing practice for me rather than an outcome. It's about something that I do for myself that makes me feel like a better human and a more creative person, and it brings me joy. And I think that's a lot of the message that comes from this podcast too, that I really have internalized a lot this year of like when you hear writers speak over and you go, there's all these external reasons to write and we all want to do it as a job, but most writers want to be paid for their work. But when you really tap into those intrinsic motivations, I think that's when things start to change as well. And you give yourself permission to just explore as well.
Yeah.
Can I say one thing in response to that, Pam? I was just going to say that I think that's really good. Like Annie, we're so often told as aspiring authors, finish a project. That's what you've got to do. But also, having quite a few years now behind me, I know the benefit of being excited by something. And sometimes I think the wisdom is knowing when to put something aside and that it's not the right time. And if there's something that's exciting you more and that you're really feeling passionate about, then that is the project. So many people are like, yeah, I must finish it because the goal is publication, right? And as you said, a lot of people work. But in the end, like, if you're really feeling what you're writing and you're excited about it, that's going to be a much better project.
Yeah, and you're going to be more motivated to get. Okay, I'll just top in with what my writing year was like. It was a pretty big year for me this year compared to a couple of the previous years, because I had novella out in January, and that was something different. That was my first novella. And then this December, this Christmas, I've had the second one come out. So it's been the year of the novellas, and I'm about to start writing my third one. They have asked for another one for next year for an anthology. So
before I go, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is there any differences you have between writing a novella and a full-length book? Like when you're starting, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I was scared stiff when I started because I'm big on backstory and all the emotional layers and the psychology, character psychology and all that stuff. And I thought I'm not really going to be able to go into that amount of detail. So I did send a help email to my other fellow anthology writers, Stella Quinn, Penny, Janu, Alyssa Callum was in it last year. They'd all written novellas, and Lily Malone. Basically, they said minimal, if any, backstory, although inevitably, for me anyway, there's always little threads that come through, but you got to keep them fairly tight. Helps if the characters already know each other.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And I guess it's more about the kind of plot than the character development in a lot of ways. Having said that, I've read kind of literary novellas, which are, the
all character development. Yeah. So, thank you.
So, I had the novellas, and then I had the second book in the Blackwater Lake series came out on audio in, I want to say March, but I think it was May. And that was the first kind of new full-length book that I've had out for quite a while, for a few years. So that was exciting, although a little bit sad in a way that it was only on audio, because I still think even though audio is super popular, a lot of people don't count it as a book. Like I've had heaps of emails and messages from people saying, oh, when's it actually coming out? Like, when's it out? I'm like, it's actually out. It's just in a particular format. So it's almost like it doesn't count until it's out in print.
I think they need to speak to Caroline Overington about that. She's a fabulous writer, and all her books are audio only at the moment. Yeah. And there are a lot of audio only books, and they're done that way on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listening is reading.
Yeah, that's right. I agree, Mary Lou. So anyway, that was exciting because that was the second book in what's turned into a series that I never really expected to write. And I have just finished and sent off the final edits for the third book, which will be coming out on audio in March. So that's been really good. Finishing a series that I actually started the draft in 2009 and it was published in 2012, and then came back to that character a couple of years ago, wrote the second book, and now I finished the third book. So that's been really good. I've been enjoyed taking that character on and finishing the journey, if you like, that I started with her all that time ago, and I knew was never really finished. I knew there was always potential to develop that story more. So that's been really good. Yes, it's been very busy on the writing front. It got me back into a bit of a writing habit, which I had have now fallen out of it again, but I've got to get back into it when I start the novella. It's going to be after Christmas. And I had, I guess another highlight of my writing year was running a writing retreat. I had a really great bunch of people on the writing retreat back in May, the Next Chapter writing retreat. And on the podcast, massive highlight has been finding Annie and having Annie help me on the pod, because it's just been such a huge weight off my shoulders for her to take on a lot of the social stuff and the transcripts and all the wonderful things that she does. And also getting onto Substack. I've really enjoyed that kind of whole process, and I was a little bit scared of it. I think initially it's just like a new thing you've got to learn, but it's actually not very daunting at all, and it's quite an exciting place to be. So really enjoying having Rights for Women over on Substack.
Oh, I'm glad that you're enjoying it. It's going so well.
I'm loving it, and I'm actually really looking forward to having a bit of downtime over the break and actually going back and reading, because there's always so many, I kind of scroll through and there's so many great writing posts and things that are going up there. I'm always like, oh, I'll read that later. And if they're short, I'll stop and read them. But yeah, it'll be nice to just have some downtime and to read through that. Yeah. So no, that's been really good.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question that I had, and I think this has been covered vaguely by a couple of you, and Annie, you mentioned this, but was there anything that you remember learning this year about the writing process, the writing life, the publishing industry, any big kind of light bulb moment that you've had about writing? Jo, can you go with that one?
Getting back into a regular writing practice is funny you should say that, Pam, because I was out of it for a long time because I was promoting for so long. And I knew in the back of my mind, you still have to be writing otherwise. But I had started writing this book way before I had to do publicity on the duology. But it was just getting back into that writing flow again. And like Annie said, diarising it and just making it like, this is brushing my teeth. I have to do it. I get up in the morning, this is what I do, until I have to go to work. And sometimes I think and I think I put this in your newsletter, it's not exactly new stuff, but it's rediscovering that it actually works. And sometimes on those days where you just really do not feel like writing at all, I will just say to myself, I'm just going to have a little read of my work. I'm going to have a little read today. I'm not going to put any pressure on myself to write anything new. I'm just going to read over what I've written. And invariably, you just end up either editing or carrying on with a chapter.
That's great.
And it's just like taking that pressure of, I've never ever been able to, if I put I've got to do 1,000 words a day, it becomes something that I push against,
right, and
feel very pressured about. And whereas if I don't actually say that to myself, if I say I'm just going to have a little read, but I've got to be at the desk, I end up doing 1,000 words a day.
Yeah.
Right? And it's incredible.
Like you're tricking yourself into it.
Yeah, you're tricking yourself. And also the other thing, which is an old Ernest Hemingway trick, is to leave mid-sentence in a paragraph so that you know what you're going to write next. And then immediately when you return to the desk the next morning, it jumpstarts you back straight into the writing, which is an old trick that I find works for me.
Yeah, great. Love that. How about you, Mary Lou? Any learning curves?
Oh, gosh. I'm just going to agree with Jo actually a lot on the whole writing process because, like I said, I had the next year or so mapped out as to where I'd be in the world, and that just got for 6 or whatever it is. And I found it very hard to concentrate and get back into it. It reminded me of COVID. Some people wrote really well in COVID, but I just had this kind of background buzz the whole time, and I found it really tough. So I found it actually very hard to write, and my momentum went, and it took me a while to get back into it. And then it was just get it done. I used to do the word count thing, Jo, of 2,500. I dropped it down to 1. I just took the pressure off. I just went, just make it to 1. Just make it to 1,000 a day. And I think the other big thing for me, and this is the opposite of you, Pam, is that I did not get audiobooks. Everyone else I knew were getting audio deals because it's growing and growing. And I didn't. And the Chocolate Factory did really well, and everyone expected it would get picked up, and it didn't. And finally, the Jam Maker, which comes out early next year, and the Chocolate Factory got picked up. And I went, just never give up.
Yeah.
Never give up. I had the books in print, ebook, but I didn't have the audio. And I had a lot of people saying, where's the audio? And I'd go, it's out of my hands. I couldn't understand why they hadn't been picked up. My publisher couldn't understand why they hadn't been picked up. And it was confusing and frustrating. And it didn't go to the usual company. Another company picked me up. And it was a huge relief, actually. Because it's interesting, especially in this day and age. And I did have one person accuse me of being ableist because I wasn't catering to those with thing difficulties.
Oh, like, really? And there's nothing you can do about it. If you can't get an audio publisher to take your books, then
no.
But I think the general public don't understand that, do they? A lot of people don't get the way the industry works, I guess. So.
But I also think that these days, because audiobooks are so popular and the popularity is just going through the roof. We had our author day, HarperCollins author day, and I know books are doing okay, nonfiction has gone down, audio through the roof. And that was the same the year before. And my publisher and I going, then why haven't these books been picked up? It is just so popular, and people expect your books to be in audio.
Yeah, that's true.
It feels a bit, if they use the word retro, I don't even know if that's the right word, if they're not. I was just thinking that I would have to wait until the audio rights reverted to me and I would take care of it myself. But fortunately, these 2 books have been picked up.
Yay.
So just another lesson in perseverance, even though it was completely out of my hands.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I should have mentioned probably the biggest highlight for me for the year, and it relates to that lesson in perseverance, is that all of my backlist and the 2 new books were picked up by Vinci, who is a UK publisher who work with indie authors who really want to put the books out there but don't want to do all the advertising and all that sort of stuff. So, they've brought my whole backlist plus the 2 new books and potentially books down the line. So they're about to come out gradually, I think, on Kindle over the next kind of few months. And then in June, all of them will come out together at the same time with new covers. They've got gorgeous new covers and they'll all come out in print again. So
that's great. Huh?
Yeah.
Amazing.
That is wonderful.
Yeah, I was very excited about that.
So good.
Yeah.
And was that through your agent?
It was through a contact that my agent had. So the guy who is the CEO of Vinci, Mark Smith, has been in publishing for a long time. He's Australian, but he's lived in the UK for a long time and been involved with different publishing companies over there. And I don't know which companies, but over the last kind of decade or so, he's bought smaller companies. They build them up and then sell them to Hachette or one of the bigger companies. But he's gone in with a whole bunch of people. So one is James Blatch, who used to be on the Self-Publishing Show podcast. And it's actually the company that was called Fuse Books that James Blatch and Mark Dawson set up as part of the Self-Publishing Show. And it's now been bought out and a whole lot of investors have come on board, and it's called Vinci Books. Yeah, and they've just got this model where it's an interesting model. You hand over your manuscript, it's got to be completely edited. They don't do any editing, but they do everything else, formatting, cover design, uploading, and then they do all the Amazon and Facebook advertising. So their model is to put all the money into the advertising and then it's a 50-50 profit split. Anyway, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. So it's a bit of an experiment, but I figure I've got the backlist there, so I may as well do something with it.
Absolutely. And is it in print as well as ebook?
Yeah, they'll be all out in print in mid-year next year. They're getting all the ebooks out, and ideally they would have liked the audio as well, but I'd already sold the audio to Belinda, because usually they get all the rights from their authors, the whole package, film and everything, and they're pursuing all those different avenues. Yeah, but what I was going to say was you just never know what's going to happen. You don't know what's around the corner. Like I got the rights back from Hachette, but I was really reticent. I'm really happy that I did the self-publishing thing, the 2 books that I put out there, but I'm not savvy enough to really follow up with all the advertising and stuff like that. It's just not where I want to spend my time. I'd rather be spending it on the writing. And even now I'm going through a bit of a drama with Amazon trying to get, I thought all the books had been taken down, and they haven't been. They have been in Australia, some of them, but then others in the US are still up, and then trying to transfer the rights across Da Vinci. That emailing through with Amazon is just doing my head in. So even that is driving me nuts. But so just to have somebody else take care of all that, like I just had them sitting there. So I thought, when this opportunity came up, I may as well see where it goes. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. How about you, Annie? What's been your biggest learning thing this year?
Just listening to all these writers collectively who are people that I admire and look up to, and whose careers I would love to emulate or anything like that. It's just really just this understanding, and you hear it over and over again, but maybe you have to hear it so many times before it sinks in, that self-doubt and imposter syndrome and all those feelings are actually just part of the creative process. Yes, being a published author is a lot of our dream jobs, but a dream job's still a job, and it has its downsides, and it's got things that people don't like about it and things that people love about it, but just accepting that, pretty much that feeling of, am I doing this right? Is this going to work? Is this story going to work out? That's something that stays with you for a fair chunk of each project. I just had always assumed that maybe those were signs that I was doing things wrong. Whereas now I just have started to accept that as part of the process of being a creative. And maybe the overall work, once it goes through all those editing stages, et cetera, is the sign of how much you've still got to learn and how far you are from that goal, rather than the feelings being the sign that you're not there.
Yeah.
Annie, it's so funny. I think the last couple of books, at some stage in the writing, I've just gone, I have to give the advance back. This book isn't working. I can't write. I really can't do this. I can't finish this. I'm not a writer. I can't write. I'm just going to forget all about it.
Yeah. I think we pretty much all go there with every book, don't we?
And the more you work with writers and you interact with them, you just chat with them, and you know that they've got a deadline coming up or whatever, that even these people that are so successful still have those moments. And then I guess that's been a bit of a light bulb for me, being like, oh, this is normal and this is just part of what happens. You just have to keep pushing through that.
Yeah.
I don't know. So yeah, that's been a big eye-opener to be like, oh yeah, this is just what we all do.
Many years ago, I said to a very well-known Australian author, I imagine you just up in this tower, just writing a few beautiful pages every day and tossing them out the window to your minion underneath, who gathers them all up and takes them to your publisher. And gosh, she laughed.
I think that's what a lot of unpublished authors imagine that you guys are like, and what it's like. Like, you've made it. You've figured this out now. So yeah, I think it's a pretty fair analogy.
Might be what we look like on the outside.
Yeah, your swans come on the outside and then paddling underneath.
Yeah, exactly. Just shifting gear a little bit, what have been your top reads, or are there any standout books that you have had the pleasure of reading this year? Annie?
Yes, I certainly loved The Other Bridget, so I got to read that for work, and I'm about to read The Bad Bridesmaid over Christmas. And I got to do this really cool task where I pulled out every book that was mentioned in The Other Bridget and made like a reading challenge. And then I started reading books from there too.
Oh,
so
great.
the follow-up for me, and the book that I hadn't read, and I can't believe I hadn't read, and it's just stayed with me the whole year, was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig.
I haven't read that yet.
Oh my gosh, it came along right at the time that I needed to read it in my life. And it's all about multiple timelines. And if your life was a library of different timelines that you could pull off and different lives you could live, would you still want the one that you're in? So really deep stuff, but some books just haunt you throughout the year too, but in a good way.
Rachael, before you go, do you want to just maybe tell us what you're going to be reading over the holidays?
Yeah, I have to remind myself. Not as much as I would like to be reading, because I would rather have the whole holidays just to lie by the pool and read books. Possibly, Marianne, it's because of it's because of the 2 books a year thing. I always seem to manage to have a deadline around Christmas. I won't be reading as much as I want, but I am looking forward to reading Karina May's, which is on my desk, That Island Feeling. I've also got on the floor a copy of Beth O'Leary's next book, Swept Away, which bribed the publicist Hachette to give me. I'm reading some Christmas fiction at the moment, or trying to. I read multiple books at once, much to my husband's amusement. And he's like, "Weren't you reading another book 5 minutes ago?" And I'm like, "Yes," but now I've switched to this one. But probably my 2 favourite books, I don't know if you're going to ask that, but my 2 favourite books this year, aside from Australian books, because obviously I'm reluctant to choose a top in the Australian one because we know people, and then it'll be like, why didn't you choose me? So Australian fiction aside, 2 of my favourite books that I've read this year are Sandwich by Catherine Newman, which is a really slim little book, but really packs a punch. And the other one is Same as It Ever Was by Claire Lombardo. And I've had her first book, The Most Fun We Ever Had, for many years in my TBR, because one of my favourite authors often recommends her. And Reese Witherspoon actually picked her first books, the same as The Most Fun We Ever Had, recently, even though it came out a few years ago. So it's having a bit of a thing. So I'm reading that. It's 180,000 words or whatever.
Oh my God.
So I want to finish that over the summer. And then I've got some other advanced reading copies. And then, I have an online book club, Rachael John's online book club. So I have to read the January book, which is Leave the Girls Behind by Jacqueline Bublé. There's always plenty to read around here.
No sleeping.
Yeah. Who needs sleep? You can sleep when you're dead.
How about you, Mary Lou? Have you had any standout reads this year?
Emily Maguire's latest novel, Rachael. Honestly, honest to God, I wish I could write like that. And I think it's a shoo-in for the Historical Novel Society of Australia's big prize, which happens every 2 years. But it was just amazing. I do love historical fiction. I surprised myself by really enjoying Leanne Moriarty's latest.
Okay.
And I can't say that I've enjoyed all of her recent books. But there isn't it Cici Lyra, whose workshops, whose workshops we do, and she just keeps on talking about Leanne Moriarty. She's such a huge fan. So after the last workshop we did with her, I went, okay, I just have to read this latest book, and I just romped through it in 2 days flat. She just goes so in depth into each character and their reasonings and their thinkings, but she does that internalization like nobody's business.
Yeah.
I'm just looking back at my past listens. Out of the Ashes by Pamela Cook.
Don't see that.
Blackwater Lake by Pamela Cook. I really enjoyed listening to those. They were fabulous.
How about you, Jo?
Yeah, I had a bit of a Mary Lou similar experience. Was it Mary Lou who said, or maybe Annie, coming to a book late? I've never read The Night Circle, and I resisted. Working in a bookshop for 10 years, you tend to push back against books that get too much attention, and you go, I just have to stock this and keep on stocking this bloody book, and I just don't want to read it. And then eventually, because I'm doing this Victorian era novel, I thought I'm doing a sort of whole spate of Victorian era settings. And I read it, and I have to say, it took me half the book to get into it, a good half. And I did it as an audio. So normally audio, it comes alive a lot quicker, even with heavier books. And I don't think this is a particularly heavy book, but I just expected it to be brilliant. And halfway through, I was like still on the verge of not finishing it. And then it just all started picking up. Wow. Normally that middle section of a novel can be the place where you go, it's getting a bit stodgy, I don't know where I'm going. But then it was just like the second half just flew. And I loved it. The other one is The Bright Sword that I read, Lev Grossman's new Arthurian retelling, which was amazing, just beautifully written and stunning. Masterful fantasy. I came to this book, Things in Jars by Jess Kidd, which is another Victorian detective novel. A Victorian female detective goes on the hunt for a missing child with her ghost sidekick, who's her man element. It's absolutely amazing. It's so well written, beautifully written, and historically researched. It was fantastic. I loved it. Obviously, Kel Wood's Upon a Starlit Tide. I really loved it. It's great. I thought it was actually even better than After the Forest. And then I've been doing the Dana Schwartz Anatomy, and it's a duology, Anatomy and Immortality, which is about a female Victorian doctor in the early Victorian period, which is really fascinating. And then What the River Knows, which is turn of the century Egyptology with fantasy elements. Yeah, so all of these books have fantasy elements. And then if anybody wants a really hot erotica, which I occasionally dabble with, I was listening to a podcast called the Culture Study Podcast, which I really love. It's an American woman who runs that, and they just talk about culture, popular culture, and books come up a lot. Book Talk, Bookstagram. So scroll through some of the episodes because they are very relevant to writers. And I think the topic of this particular episode was, I can't remember what the topic was. It was something to do with books. But anyway, the woman who came on as a guest was talking about the resurgence of like how Book Talk has made fairy smut and erotic fiction okay to talk about. We can actually admit that we're reading it. And she recommended this book called Priest by Sierra Simone. And it's full on porn, but it's so good. It's so well written.
Oh, really? What is it? Fairy porn?
No, it's actually set in contemporary times, and it's about a priest. It's about a priest who has an affair with one of his parishioners. So he's got really, if you're religious, don't read it because it's going to be really near the knuckle. And they do it everywhere, all over, in all places that are religious. So yeah, you can imagine if that's not your bag. But I like reading a little bit of erotica because it gives me some inspiration for how to write my own sex scenes. Some of the sex scenes in erotica are really well written. They're hot. As opposed to some of the literary fiction writers who do sex scenes where, you're going, this is just not very sexy. And so anyway, now and again I will go into, if somebody recommends some erotica, it is not 50 Shades, that stuff. This is 10 steps beyond 50 Shades.
Right. So, the real deal.
It's the real deal.
Wow.
Oh, and the other thing I'm about to read is Juliet Marillier's, this is an advanced reading copy that I got from New Dawn, which is The Amber Owl, which I'm very excited about reading. And a research book that I'm reading is called Holy Shit, which is the history of swearing.
Okay.
And swearing comes up a lot in my books. And I'm really interested in where swear words come from, being a medievalist. And so that's a book that I got recently and I've been dabbling.
A very eclectic batch you've got there, Jo.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Books that I guess have stood out for me this year, Tom Lake would be one by Anne Patchett, which I listened to, and I think part of the attraction for me was I listened to it on audio and Meryl Streep was the narrator, so it was perfect for that character. I subsequently at Sydney Writers Festival bought the hard copy because it has one of those beautiful printed flowers on the
I got
pages.
sucked in as well, Pam. I got sucked into that copy.
Me too.
Looks great on the bookshelf. I did love Funny Story, Emily Henry, massive fan. And I remember walking into the bookshop in Kiama the day that book came out and it was on the shelf. So I went home and read it immediately. Still not up there with book lovers for me, but I did enjoy it. And I have actually really enjoyed the last book that I read for the podcast, which was The Last Illusion of Paige White, Vanessa McCausland. I thought she's done an absolutely brilliant job. It's something a little bit different. It's got a kind of, not spec fic, but a kind of bit of a woo-woo type narrative going through it, as well as contemporary and a bit of mystery. It's a bit of a genre mashup, which I really like. I enjoy that. And over the holidays, I'm actually looking forward to reading a book that I haven't gotten here, but I picked up at a signing, which was Marcus Zusak, 3 Wild Dogs and the Truth.
Lovely.
A memoir of his life with his rescue dogs. And it's really about family and all that sort of wonderful stuff that Marcus writes about. And I'm going to actually read Lola in the Mirror, the Trent Dalton book that I bought, I think, last January, and it's still sitting in my pile. So I'm actually reading some male authors because I tend to read all women authors, of course, for the podcast. And I also have the Leon Moriarty. I bought that the other day because I like you, Mary Luce, like you said, quite a few people have said to me, yeah, they haven't really enjoyed the last couple as much, but they have really enjoyed this latest one. So looking forward to reading that.
I have to admit, I was influenced by, and I'm so often influenced by the podcast. I don't save much money because every time I listen to one, I end up going and buying books. But Wing. I was out on the weekend. I was like, I have to find this book, and I reckon I'm probably already 25%, and I don't have time to read, so I'm just like getting little. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, actually, I did really enjoy Wing as well. It's just something a bit like quite different, and yeah, Nikki Gemmell is amazing.
Of course, I can't buy books. I can buy books for my Kindle, but there's no point me. I buy research books because they're often secondhand, out of print, so I will buy them and they travel with me. But honestly, BorrowBox, what's the one Belinda has? Libby's the other one. So the library app is fabulous, as well as buying stuff on Kindle and Apple Books, and my little library carrier comes along with me on my phone.
You can get audiobooks through BorrowBox too, Mary Lou.
Yes, certainly can.
Before we wrap up, what are you looking forward to in 2025, writing or otherwise? Jo?
Is me putting shopping a new book around. Hopefully I'm going to get this draft finished, and at least by the second half of 2025 I want to be shopping it around. One of the things which probably comes under the first question, which is what have you learned about publishing? I'm not under contract. I was for the duology, but it was basically written, so I didn't feel that pressure of being under contract. And I'm not under contract, which has given me this amazing freedom to just explore my writing in my pace and what I want to write. But the flip side is it something they're going to want? But it doesn't matter. I've realized that I don't have to not work and be a full-time writer. I can be a worker and still write, and that gives me the freedom to not be under contract. And that has been a big revelation for me, because I always thought I wanted to be a full-time writer. And you know what, there are pros, there are some definite advantages to still having part-time work that gives you that bread and butter money so that you can work independently of publishers. Because I think sometimes working at the pressure and at the mercy of publishers isn't always the best creative path for some people. And I think I was talking to a few writers about it recently, and they were saying, I just really am desperate to get out of contract now so that I can have that freedom to play. And so that was a little bit of a revelation for me, thinking that I don't have to play that game. I don't have to do a book a year. I can do this at my own pace, which is still maintaining the joy in it.
I so agree with that, Jo. For the Apple Blossom, I only got a 1-book deal, and I was a little bit miffed, to tell you the truth, because everyone else was getting the debut authors had 2-book deals. And then I went, this is a blessing. You can take your time, you can decide what you're going to write next, you can just do your research. And so when HQ came back and said, that sold quite well, what else have you got? And I went, don't know. I just went, we'll see. And the same after the next 2-book deal. I've got to ask you, what do you got next? I went, don't know.
I don't think publishers have any business telling writers what to write. That's not the way it should work. I think it really kills creativity.
It's gotten a bit out of control that way, hasn't it? Particularly, in commercial fiction, I think definitely.
Yeah. And I know branding is really important, but I just think that publishers still don't know what's going to go off until they have it, until it's going off. So for them to dictate to writers, we need a Lola in the Mirror book, or we need a historical fantasy book, or we need in our catalogue. Yeah, you might, but you can't go and tell one of your stable authors, go away and write this now because this is what we need. Because by the time it's written, the next fad's gone off anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, lots of learning around the industry in that respect.
Yes. Mary Lou, I'm guessing you're looking forward to having a new book out, but is there anything else in particular you're looking forward to?
I am thrilled to have The Jam Maker out. I love this book. I am looking forward to whipping the next one into shape for my beta readers, my early readers. I just love them. They're always so helpful. Yeah, they make quite a big difference to The Jam Maker. I'm looking forward to being back in Australia and just hanging out with writer friends. That's really one of the big things I miss in this slow travel world. Is I have huge FOMO, everyone getting together for book launches and stuff like that, or their writing groups or going on writing retreats. I was so jealous when I saw all the stuff about you're writing a retreat, Pam. I thought I'd be there. being back in Australia for a while and getting this next one finished, which I also love.
How about you, Annie? What are you looking forward to 2025?
Oh, a few things, I suppose, like big overarching goal, looking forward to building the business more, taking on more author mental loads so we can get writers meeting deadlines and all of those things. But events wise, I'm really looking forward to the RWA conference this year. I'm going to be going to Rachael John's Reader, her online book club conference. I'm looking forward to that. And the Blush Romance Festival on the 14th of February in Brisbane. So there's a few little calendar events that I'm really just excited about, and I find that gives you something to split the year up to.
Yeah.
And then from a writing perspective, again, I guess the brilliant part of working in books is that you don't feel the pressure to, with your own book, you can just enjoy it just for yourself. From a writing perspective, really just looking forward to continuing to develop that creative practice and letting that manuscript kind of do its thing.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm looking forward to continuing on and growing Substack for Rights for Women. I'm also looking forward to another retreat that I'm running in April. I've got a new grandbaby coming. New grandbaby in May, a girl. We've got the girl coming with lots of shopping opportunities. Already started on that. And I'm actually looking forward. I'm going back to teaching at Writing New South Wales next year too, doing a couple of online courses, some manuscript feedback and a novel writing course with them. I haven't done anything there for a while, so that'll be good. And looking forward to getting all my books back out there in mid-year in print and ebook. So
that's so wonderful.
Anyway, you ladies have been fantastic. Is there anything else anybody wants to add before we wrap up?
No, just thank you for another wonderful year, Pam, on Rights for Women. It's just such a fabulous podcast. And long before I was working on it, it was something that was fueling my creativity and passion for writing. I think you've been doing it for 7 years now.
So. I think it was 2017. When Kel and I first started.
So thank you. Just thank you so much for creating such a wonderful community. And I can't wait to see who you have on next year.
Thanks, Annie.
And I'm going to second that, being a Substack subscriber and getting all the lovely little extra bits and pieces that make me feel so special. And I think the other thing that does is I've talked about not having the kind of physical presence connection that I would like to have if I was back in Australia, is I still feel connected. And a lot of that is due to you, Pam, and your podcast and your Substack and those little extra bits and the other things that you do for your subscribers, like the occasional kind of Zoom in thing, which, Zoom stuff for me it's necessary, really, just to keep me connected with other writers. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Lovely.
I wish you all a very Merry Christmas and enjoy your break. And if you're having one, enjoy your reading, your Christmas reading and your time with your family and friends. And we'll be back to do it all again in 2025.
Yay! Hooray!
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya.
Okay, just signing off for the year. Have a fantastic Christmas. Thank you so much to everybody who has listened to Rights for Women this year, who has supported the podcast with reviews on Substack in all the places. Would be fantastic if you can share the love, let other people that you know that you think might love Rights for Women. Don't forget you can also watch it on YouTube, and stay safe, stay happy, enjoy Christmas. Hope you get lots of downtime and reading time, and we'll see you again beginning of Feb 2025. Merry Christmas, everyone. Thanks for listening to Rights for Women. I hope you've enjoyed my chat with this week's guest. If you did, I'd love it if you could add a quick rating or review wherever you get your podcasts so others can more easily find the episodes. Don't forget to check out the backlist on the Rights for Women website. So much great writing advice in the library there. And you can also find the transcript of today's chat on the website too. And you can connect with me through the website at rightsforwomen.com, on Instagram and Twitter at W4W Podcast, the Facebook page Rights for Women, or find me and my writing at pamelacook.com.au. Thanks for listening, have a great week, and remember, every word you write, you're one word closer to typing the end.